Okay, telling me it couldn't share the sound of my computer, which probably should be okay. Because anything that happens here on the computer, the sound.
Yeah, can you see if what the YouTube video does? If you test it? Are y'all hearing anything? Okay. It might be. I might need to turn it back on. Yeah, we're getting some. I'm not sure why it went.
Let's try now.
So that's coming through your speakers, so yeah, cool. So then that'll be on the recording. Okay. All right. Well. Glad we decided to have you come a little early.
That's always good.
Yeah, just with everything, like even like, unfortunately, we've had some trouble with our Wi-Fi on campus the last few weeks, so like they were doing presentations the other day and everybody had it on their email or Google Drive or whatever and they could pull it up.
Yep.
Just.
We are so dependent on the
We
internet
really
right now.
It's
Crazy.
And I think all of our network techs are just trying to make it work, you know? So we got this email from, I guess he's our chief information officer for the entire university. He's like, we're doing our best, y'all. Like, that was basically his message.
But this is an art class.
It's art history.
Okay.
Yeah. But as I said, some folks have come from architecture. They're still taking architecture classes, but not everyone will
Sure.
have architectural awareness. Yeah.
Okay. Because my focus is very architecture.
Yeah.
Less of art right now, but
Yeah.
the idea that the transformation of what used to be art, the earlier days, how is it transformed? What's the idea behind it?
Yeah.
Can we afford to get the same design art back in
Oh,
the
yeah.
new building, or are we kind of do something different? That
Yeah.
resembles, then so it's not super expensive.
Yeah. And you can't afford. Yeah.
But those are the things I'll touch. But
Yeah.
in
And
general,
I imagine, you know, too, it's like we all have this modern aesthetic that we want glass walls and all this stuff and the expectations of the modern audience. Yeah. I realized I didn't bring my notebook.
sure.
Like we're at 1 o'clock, we'll go ahead and get started. I think the technology is working for us. So we'll just cross our fingers on that. We might have to reassess at whatever point. I'm very excited to introduce Mr. Rabindra Adhikari, who is here to discuss a project he's working on behalf of the Nepali Cultural and Spiritual Center. So he'll be describing the work that he's doing for that organization, and then also some of the ways in which the art and architectural traditions that we've been studying this semester might be building into the designs, but maybe also responding to them or modifying them, right? And those sort of questions that come up when we think about contemporary architecture and its reflections on the past, and then also in new places, right? And new geographies. So Please do forgive us if a few students walk in late. It is
That's
college.
perfectly fine. Yes.
But please do help me welcome our guest.
Thank
We're
you.
very excited to have him. And we also have an MFA student with us today. No pressure, no pressure at all. But who's joined us as well, who's interested in the discussion. So I'm going to turn it over, and if something breaks, we'll just fix it. But hopefully we'll be good.
Figure it out.
And we're recording, right? Yes.
Yes. All right, I'm gonna show, let me introduce myself a little more than what she did. I went to Ball State University in Indiana to do my master's in architecture. So I am a architecture professional. But then I am making my way into different things, not just design, but construction. And one of the big thing that I realized is design is one thing, but realizing it in real life to kind of make it happen, it's an entirely different game, right? Which many people try to kind of like, from a business perspective, they have championed that, and they kind of do come up with a great buildings, pretty much financially driven. So in this effort, I found this opportunity to help my community. Me coming from Nepal, migrated here about 20 years ago, so it's been a while. And what we have here is a kind of like an introduction and a status update and what we are doing in the future, how this is coming along. This project has taken almost like 5 years so far. And then we are at a certain stage because of the money and the people involvement. And there are lots of things that we need to kind of always make a balance and move forward. So bear with me. I'll show what we're doing, and then probably that kind of spurs some directions, to have some conversations if we need to, and also kind of maybe motivate and encourage you in terms of thinking how a cultural shift from different country to here, and how we are trying to find a balance so that it's not completely American, neither it's very traditional that we have been used. So it's a little bit of balance that we have tried to figure out. So it's a the planning and effort is kind of like where I contribute my time for the community. So bear with me. Here's a little video I would like to share to begin with. With that precursory thing, All right, so Nepali Cultural and Spiritual Center. That's the name that we call our organization. It's located, the existing address, if anybody's interested to go visit, it's at 2016 West Groweiler. It's in Irving. And we are now in a phase where we are moving that facility because we have like outgrown that facility. We need more square footages, more functions, more activities happening. So we purchased land in new address, which is at 1212 Old Parkway. That's in Euless. And we are in the process of moving from there to the new location. That's the intent to go in a larger facility. So our needs are, we have grown exponentially since like 10 years, a decade. What started like a small community is now almost 42,000 people living in DFW area. On June 9, 2007, that's the same year that I moved to Dallas from Ball State after graduating. And I met with these people, and we all of a sudden, like the excitement was there, and I was fresh out of school. Oh, we're designing a temple here, temple area, and the cultural center. That got me very excited immediately, right? So that was my first interaction with the community in terms of, hey, I can be a part of this. I can contribute my time. I can contribute my effort. Let's make this happen. Lots of iterations happened, and then we kind of like agreed, all right, well, this is going to be a community funded by membership model. So you donate money, you become the member of the community, and then you become a part of that development process itself. Primarily, the focus is on cultural activities or suitable for South Asian region. Not saying that nobody, I mean, others cannot join. It's open to anybody. It doesn't discriminate anything, but it is more geared toward the functions that South Asian people, when I say South Asian, it's people from India, Nepal, primarily, and anybody. It's a Hindu temple and a Buddhist temple. So it's a activities around culture and religion at the time, at the moment. We are about 42,000 estimated residents in a DFW Metroplex alone. So that's a huge number for the need of that facility. This is the existing building. So we purchased this building right here in Groweiler that I was mentioning earlier. First task that involved me in the process was to how can we convert this into something that we can represent a reflection of what we call a building that serves Nepali people, right? So my proposal was a simple gate. That was a very cost-effective solution. We were not going to touch the building at all because touching the building, a lot of things gets a kind of warm. That's what we call gets opened. City will get involved in a different level. Things get out of hand very quickly. So the easier solution was to kind of like find a gateway, replace that little carpet, and fit it with a nice little kind of like the shape and size of the architecture that we are used to. We're seeing those kind of gateways. Then that was the solution to begin with. And I feel very happy because whenever I'm here standing somewhere there and people walk around, oh my God, this now looks like a building from Nepal. And we haven't done much. It just added a gate. It turned the interest in people in how they perceive the facility that we purchased like this, converted into that is what it looks like right now. So obviously that was not enough space for us. So we are growing. We are now with a new design. One of the things that we're trying to figure out is what kind of activities we really get involved. There is a big challenge for us to kind of serve older generation, people who have lived their life, majority of their life in Nepal, and then us who kind of like migrated later on in our lives, and then our newborns who are now starting a completely new kind of generational change, right? Neither they feel like at home here from the cultural perspective, nor they understand where I come from or we come from, my generation come from. So it's a very tricky balance that we need to strike, where we are not forgetting our seniors, we are not forgetting ourselves, and then we're not forgetting what the new generation will evolve in this space. So that's pretty much the majority of the thoughts, any kind of discussions we have, that drives our. So it's more kind of like a based on that program and the needs for the program, based on these generations that we're trying to use. We are such a, I mean, having 42,000, but still from the financial strength perspective, we're not a big community, so we don't have a lot of money. So sustainability, and in terms of when I say sustainability, it's not the jargon sustainability that we hear every day, but more of like, how do we survive, right? How do we pay our electric bills? How do we pay our gas? Those are the things that we have to be very cognizant about, that we are not like whatever we propose is in a model that sustains on its own. So that's a part of the one of the important thing that we have discovered. Nepali people surprisingly enjoy the outdoor activities more than they are confined in a space. So that's yet another kind of like if you go in front of the previous building that I showed in Irving, you'll see a lot of people outside rather than inside. Even the intense sun, they will be standing in the shade or under the building, under the tree or canopy somewhere. But it's that activity driven things that we have discovered, and we are working toward that design as well. Again, some of the points there for the financials, which is rather important in what we are developing. So the new program looks like we have a lower floor for more like a non-religious functions. Then we have certain portion in this area here that's very specifically religious function, and then it's kind of like a collection of cultural activities, like people get married, and then if they are marrying, then there are functions specific for that particular purpose. Then we have also incorporated those activities into the building program. So having multiple kind of activities going into the building, it has served us with a challenge where there will be lots of people moving around, and having that. I mean, I took that as an opportunity where circulation of different activities. How can we kind of like channel the traffic from one activity to the other, and that kind of entailed into what we thought would be a nice layout to work with. And it's about 30 to 35,000 square feet building facility that we're planning on. The existing site looks like this. There's this private drive going right through the middle of the site, and we also purchased the building, which is the address there. That's a existing warehouse that we are currently in a process of retrofitting. We gutted out everything up to the structure level. And now I'll show you some pictures that we are kind of like redoing the outside, redoing the inside, making it suitable for our purpose. The site, the biggest challenge with the site is the elevations, right? From area right around here to over at that corner, it's almost like 40 feet difference, and that's quite challenging when we are designing like for a mass of people. It's if it was a house, maybe we are not talking about a lot of square footages, but here we're talking about 35,000 square feet of building. That difference is considerably challenging. We reached out to lots of professionals in terms of understanding how the site works, but then everybody's solution was just make it all flat, build something on it. And that wasn't something that we were after, because moving earth is very expensive. And that's where our restrictions were. We're very restricted to what we can do under given kind of like a budgetary restrictions we have. So that I took as a fantastic opportunity for me. I worked with a civil engineer. Luckily, we found somebody that was from Nepal. So communication barrier was a lot easier among the community people. And I worked with him to kind of educate him how we can solve the problem. And then he agreed with it, and he executed that to our satisfaction, which is great. We tried to reach out some other people, and they interpreted temple as a Greek temple, and that was like, okay, well, little details matter a lot, and they kind of like they were very accurate about the functions and like the kind of like activities that we needed to accommodate. But then when it turned kind of like the Z direction, when the Z direction started happening, we were surprised. It looked like a temple from the Greek. So the only temple he knew was from Greece. So I jumped in and I kind of like took that role as a designer, as an architect. This is what we presented as a dorm. So this is the proposed warehouse that we are currently working on, and we will kind of temporarily move into that facility. And down the road, maybe a couple of years later, we'll build other facilities there or other buildings. So this is a typical architectural kind of language that you see if you Google to your part and then Google Nepali architecture, then the first pictures that you'll see most likely represents like these. These are the pagoda style building during certain number of years that was very popular, and popular because of the people's ability to craft on wood. And you can see these doors, you know, the doorbells and the message. They're fantastically done in those eras, right? Now, one of the challenges for us is to kind of like we decided we are kind of like replicating the exact same copy, almost like cloning, trying to clone what's there, because that's something that is important to a lot of people. There's no point in intervening and saying, hey, it needs to be different. We're not going that direction. So we're trying to copy this building, but then what about the facility that we needed differently from what was in the past, right? And that's where some of the other buildings and how do they tie with the language of this building? What are the characteristics that we're not just placing something so traditionally thought of in art, right? Surrounded by completely modern, or what is that language that complements the traditional design? That's the main challenge that I took on. And what you see here is the kind of like an iterative result of what I'm proposing for the community. So here's a picture. This is my Google search, hey, Nepali architecture, and all of a sudden these pictures show up, and this is what you see. This is pretty much the language that people have seen, and then they have lived their life, majority of their lives in this community. And I have lived there for 5-6 years, and it is like amazingly connecting, right? It's amazingly connecting to my lifestyle, the way I think about other people, the way I want to raise my family. So it's a wonderful opportunity to kind of like go with that language. And if I can somehow replicate or somehow use the features into the building environment that we are trying to generate, that would be a fantastic opportunity for us to educate the newborns, which are kind of like a budding generation that will follow us, right? So that's the kind of like our main effort. And like I mentioned there, it's a courtyard space, like outdoor activity space. That is very important part of the living style itself. These courtyards and spaces are such a dynamic spaces that I want to copy that, basically copy that characteristics of the building. It's not the building, it's not what the ceilings are. We'll have the same ceiling, right? There's no, we're not going back to the prehistoric ceiling and trying to replicate that. We'll probably have our halls like this, but then when you go outside, that connectivity of the courtyard space is what we are trying to celebrate in this new facility. Here are some pictures, and I have some other environment that I will walk through, and that kind of gives us a little bit better idea as well. This is a main courtyard that where we will be kind of like central to the establishment there. This is the warehouse part. So warehouse is a critical, I mean, very typical metal building right now, all corrugated metal on the outside. We had a big discussion about how to utilize the property that we purchased. Then our solution was, why don't we convert that into the cultural activity building? And then the big volume that it generates kind of accommodates all our cafeterias, classrooms, medical services, and other activities that we're trying to accommodate. So that's that part right there. Here is a kind of like a solution to, I mean, it's amazing in Nepal how people that believe in Hindu religion and people believe in Buddhism, they live intertwined, right? Their activities are very closely related to their lifestyles. And this is kind of like addressing that. How can we create this space that would reflect the Hindu culture and the Buddhist culture? When I say not religion, it's culture. It's an amazing bond that they have lived over several centuries. So overall, so you can kind of like orient yourself the Buddhist establishment on this side here, Hindu establishment on that side, and obviously the cultural center, which is the renovated building on that side, is how this plan is laid out. So this is the current status. You can see some characteristics. If I go back here, you pay attention to the one building on the other far there. So you see that little tower corner pieces. This is a current. This is how it looks like right now. We will skin it all, put bricks and whatnot on that facade and convert it into something that would represent or kind of like give us a feeling of the connections that we have. Future expansions, we are looking at the kind of involvement of the Heritage Museum, sports centers to the kind of like attract the new generation, because I have my kids and anytime I said, hey, let's go to the temple, their excitement goes down because there's nothing for them to do. And we have kind of like helped them understand the relevance of going to these facilities, but then they would be looking for something more, right? Which we probably don't know yet, but our effort is to understand that need and slowly transit ourselves, because we will not be there forever, but they will, and their generation, the next generations will come in and continue. We'll hand over the process over and over again. So we think Heritage Museum serves that purpose, which will be a good thing. Sports, we're thinking like that might be a good way to kind of involve them in a almost like how the church functions, right? In that sense. So we're trying to get into that so that they don't forget the roots, at least. That's the only effort. We'll come back to the questions and comments, but before we go back there, I have something to share with you here. So give me just a second. So this is something that I have here. This I added people and whatnot. The video was actually generated from this model here. This is a game engine, and my effort in preserving or educating the new generation is to kind of like find a way so that they are a part of the game. We want to make a one-person activity that they can walk around and kind of get engaged. So that's a way we are trying to find how kids would find it technologically connected to this space. So there's a need for this change. I see iPads, iPhones, we have computers, how much we are dependent on it. And then if we kind of stuck with the traditional way of doing papers and pens, which no harm, I mean, it's still okay. But then my son would love if something was touchy, right? My daughter, we never taught her how to use the TV. And the first thing she stood up and when she was going to touch the TV, the menu on the TV, and like, how did she do that? And then we realized we were touching on the phone. Her lesson was, oh, everything is screen is touchable. So she walks and touches the screen. That's the need that we see that would help the newer generation to connect better with the facility. I mean, we will have to figure out how that works. Let me see if I can walk through here a little bit, because that other video did not give me an opportunity to show everything. So this is the traditional approach. This is where people will come in and in a like the idea being people from anywhere in DFW area would come. This is a parking area where they would park, and this is the first entrance that they would come and be greeted into the building. We have the opportunity in this building here. There's some retail options where we can start. Maybe we're coming up with different ideas, but having some retail spaces where people can actually purchase items from Nepal or whatever they need to kind of generate the income that eventually will help pay the bills for the building. That's the idea there. Then that kind of side goes into the other part of the building here. Going in through here, you have another more secular activities. We were thinking that this area would be where the Heritage Museum would effectively be located. So tourist people from outside want to learn something more about that part of the world, and that's where they can get in and get the precursory idea before they can go up into the second floor for the actual happenings, right? Or actual space. That was the idea. But if you notice here, what I found is the characteristics of Nepali architecture really primarily is defined by the way the roofs are. Like if you notice, have you ever, if anybody has been to Japan, if you go, the characteristics of Japanese architecture is on the little details right between the roof and the walls, right? That makes it such a kind of like a drastic difference. And then we can tell, oh, this is from Japan, this is from China, this is from Nepal. So I kind of like found that characteristics of the language in my terms. I found that language, and that I stuck with it, and I kind of like try to repeat whenever it's possible to a degree where people can actually relate themselves to. And my understanding is like some of these areas up here, I mean, people don't quite relate to this one as they would relate to the one that are kind of closer to their house, right? So my effort was to understand that language and try to replicate this. These features in Nepal are very elaborative. There are stories being told in those carvings, right? There are beliefs that history. I mean, you can go there. It's a religion is incarved, right? Carved into the art. And then every studs that you have, or the struts and four bells, whatever, they're beautifully carved. You can see the stories going through in the real thing. Are we gonna do that here? Yes, in the future, maybe that's the idea. The idea is why don't we tell the story of immigration? When did we start immigrating to America? That could be a great story. We will encarve into like laser, steel, something that we will have a story to tell around. And that's what I'm proposing, which will take maybe decades to do that. But again, that's the thought. How are we replicating the interest of people so that we create history for the next generation, right? That's the whole idea, intention, and purpose that we're trying to do that here. So you come in here, and then you go up to the main courtyard here, then. And luckily I found these people, which is kind of like fantastic, but they don't look like people from Nepal. So my wife looks at it and then like, you don't have people from Nepal. What's the point? And I said, you know what? This is the day when somebody decided to visit the facility. So we have all visitors here. But then you go to the courtyard, and this is the courtyard where it connects to all activities that you're going through, right? You have the cultural center. Kids want to go to school. You would want to come in this way, go in here, and that's where you'll find your kids ready to go to school, right? So that's the area there. It was a battle for me to kind of like make sure we put the vehicle out of my facility. When I say my facility, because people wanted, oh, why is not my car parked right in front of the building? That's not the point. And then they are so used to the modern understanding of car, and then I'm trying to put cars away. So it was a little bit of a battle within ourselves, but then many voices kind of won, and then we decided, all right, put all the cars out of the perimeter. That's how when you see look at from the high above, then you see no cars in the facility. So that was a good decision we moved forward with. And so this is kind of like a coming back here. I am having a big time and battling with people about this space. Now, this space is something that is so dear to me because this is a most free space, which is almost like a little, we call it gazebo, or almost like a gazebo, right? This is, we call it Pati and Powa. It's a important part of the community. It's not celebrated building, but it is the building that makes the fabric of the community itself, right? You'll find people here smoking in the morning. Now, yes, people in Nepal smoke, right? So you'll find them there with a cup of tea. You'll find all the old folks sitting there talking about what happened yesterday, what's happening tomorrow. People don't realize that, but that's what I see. Tomorrow, when I go into here, I don't go there just to have some functions, right? I want to just go there and sit there and we enjoy looking at people, watching people walking around, watching kids playing, right? A lot of people agree with me, and there are some people who think that this is going to be a noise center, that it will be very noisy, and we are now very peaceful. Buddhism by nature, it's a peace-loving people, right? They don't want to be screaming and shouting, but that should not be the reason. We are developing a facility where you are accommodating early morning rituals, midday, and late in the evening. Every day is going to be different in the entire week. Saturday is different from Sunday. Monday is different from Thursday, right? How are we accommodating that? So these kind of spaces are fantastic for that particular purpose. I want my son to play guitar, and we will be sitting out there enjoying the activity. Now, does that facility should accommodate that? Absolutely, why not? Why do we have to be inside to enjoy that, right? In the evening, we'll go out there, and Dallas is such a great place in my mind that we have almost like 6 to 8 months of beautiful weather. It's the temperature. It goes down in the evenings. It might get chillier during now. It's kind of getting chillier, but that's okay. And that's what we're trying to enjoy in these spaces here. Back here, some of the money generation services that is separated. They're all enclosed and kind of on their own. And then another thing that we have to come up with an idea was because 35,000, if you heat or cool the building for entire week, an entire year, that's a lot of money that goes onto the energy bill, right? Our activities are not requiring that we can maintain the temperature down when we don't use them, or we don't have to heat them up when people are not living in those spaces. So what we have been trying to do is identify the active zones, and then whenever, depending on like Sunday, there's a activity in one particular portion of the building, then only turn on that, everything else goes to an idle mode. That's another challenge that we're trying to solve. So you can see here, these were not needed in the generation that built what we see as our traditional architecture. But now we are challenged by those things, right? And that's completely different from the needs in the past versus what we have currently, and probably potentially those would be the one that would happen to continue. So, and then you go into here through these hallways, and we go into the main main hall here. This is going to be our largest hall. Uh, we still need to work on the detailing of the inside here, but then you have a mall of, now Hinduism is such a religion where there are multiple gods. It's not a one god culture, right? It's not one god religion. It's a millions of gods religion. So every activity has its own god, and that's a different interpretation of how your life gets affected by it. So this is a mall in the center where we will have different deities, statues and whatnot, kind of for the resemblance of them. We'll have that, and Pashupati Nath, which is Lord Shiva, if you are aware of that or not. Lord Shiva is, you have seen the movie Avatar, right? The interplanetary thing. So the is that Steven Spielberg, or who was the director? I forgot. Yeah. So he studied Lord Shiva, and blue color comes from that study, right? So an avatar itself is so ingrained in the Hindu religion. Um, God took an avatar of Lord Shiva, or God took an avatar of Buddha, right? So that's the idea. So the whole idea of avatar is a kind of like a identity of God in different forms. That's why you have millions of gods, because these different kinds of avatars happen in the context, right? So that's the whole impetus of how that idea translated into the movie itself in a different context altogether. And he chose the blue color, which kind of surprised me because we grew up seeing blue as Lord Shiva. Then all of a sudden, we saw these blue giant figures, and I kind of like researched why did this blue, where did this come from, and I discovered that knowledge about Lord Shiva's interpretation there. So this is the dedicated temple here, and you can see how the outside substanding building is kind of like incorporated into the hallway. So it's a little transition that we thought would make more sense, because those days when it's raining, those days when it's really cold, it's freezing outside, and people would still want to come to the temple and they don't have to go outside, then that's our opportunity to have them go inside without having to go out and serve the function. So we are kind of quite aware of that situation there. Then you would come outside and come see this over here. Um, I wanted to kind of educate the society about what kind of activities can happen. And these are some booths that, let's say we are doing a blood donation program, or we are doing some kind of educational seminar, or whatever that is, right? We can just set a table outside, and that becomes more of a cultural space or activity space that we can cherish. Back here, there will be Center for Meditation. Um, Again, some representation of this is a Buddhist shrine called Swambhu, and this is quite popular in Nepal. And we have the Buddhist hall being programmed in this building. They're not big, so size-wise, you don't have like Nepal. Traditionally, we don't have huge structures. Everything is to the human scale, right? Very, very lower down version of it. There are temples which are supposed to be like a very important from the religion perspective. They are quite large, but in a comparison of like what you see in other parts of the world, like Europe or other places, these are relatively very small. So the contour 40 feet difference that was a challenge for many actually became such a valuable tool for me, because then that helped me scale down the building, yet be able to put all the programs that we need in a subtle way. So that has been the effort so far, to kind of like there will be people, especially old people, who have to park and then walk quite a bit. They may not be super happy, but I think that's a good exercise that you'll have to come and take a walk before you go to the places. That, in a nutshell, that's what we are doing right now. And now we can open up for questions and answers. I mean, questions and comments, if you have any. I'll open for that.
But just like interesting stuff. It really struck me. This the you brought up some amazing stuff that's connecting to stuff that we've talked about. But could you speak a little bit more? So this is a game engine, and we do have some folks who are in, gaming studios, and they're working with 3D and virtual technologies. So what is the plan for, you said, engaging, say, your children's generation, and sort of like gauging how they might, like this simulation of the future space, like how they're going to engage with it? Is that the idea behind it?
That's the idea. That's the idea that, again, it's a, so the idea is, my son loves playing Roblox and Minecraft, right? They're into this virtual space that they are excited about. What we're thinking is, if we can, like I mentioned about Avatar, I explained that to you. I have not done that to my son yet because he doesn't understand he probably haven't seen Avatar yet, right? So eventually the idea would be somebody goes into this game engine, stands right in front of this temple, then it would be more like a informational session goes in. Hey guys, did you know that the Lord Shiva is this guy or this god that we believe in some way, or Hindu people believe? But then this is tied to the Avatar situation, right? So then that kind of, we think that that will spur some interest in, oh, wait a minute, I have seen Avatar and that is a completely different context. And what about Hindu now? Who is Lord Shiva? That's the idea of how we can tie those two back in an environment that they are used to, right? Rather than putting an encyclopedia or Googling or something, we want them to kind of get involved. That's the general idea in terms of, and they're like marriage ceremony, like this building would be dedicated for, let me show you one thing here, if I may, which is kind of like a, not many people will understand the value, but I am hoping that I will do my best later on in the future. So this is, pardon me for the lighting there, this all looks dark, but these are little openings here, right? These are windows, and if I look around, I have several of them. Okay, if I come out of this space, these actually are windows behind these little, okay. Now, traditionally, in the art and architecture of Nepal, when there were important people looking outside in the public spaces, people from the public would not be able to see them because of that screen, but they would be able to see what's happening outside. A little detail, but that's how I am finding the purpose. There are people are getting married inside, but don't get married in a closed space like this. Why don't we celebrate what's outside, right? That's the sense of like utilizing some characteristics of the building types or the way people handle their, from the security, privacy, however, whatever we want to call. Those are the things I am kind of incorporating here. Now in the game engine, they will see this window, something will pop up, and they say, hey, wait a minute. This is an architecture feature, and I can now explain the essence of public and private and how certain kind of architectural treatment, certain kind of need serve that purpose. So it's a tool from that perspective, if that makes
I
sense.
think you might have some beta testers who might be interested in walking around it, because we have a game focus in our department. So it could be really interesting for even, I know you're thinking for the younger generation, but even for the older adults. You're not millennials, what are you? Whatever it is, yeah. Because I think, like the Heritage Museum, but then having these virtual components too could be really amazing for a broader.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Any questions from the audience?
Yes.
We're talking about the heritage. Where is it going to be based on art that's from the calling community there, or is it going to be artifacts that's going to be transported from? So, help with that.
It's going to be both. It's going to be both, but more importantly, the establishment of the facility and why this establishment happened to be there. And the kind of like Heritage Museum kind of reflects back into the characteristics, the cultural aspect of what we celebrate in Nepal versus how that translates into what we do today in a current different context altogether. It would be more focused on that.
Like
But
informational.
It's like a museum for and artifacts. Yes, absolutely. We are thinking of like getting, there are different kinds of musical instruments, for example, right? There will be a section in a building where musical instruments play an important role. We will teach people how to play, maybe. There will be music related to that and sharing of that knowledge from that aspect. That's how we are thinking it's going to.
I think we, as a class, we had studied one of the recent repatriations from the Dallas Museum of Art that was repatriated to the government hall, right? But,
Sure.
And so I think there are a number of questions sort of swirling around these these Nepali objects that had been taken by Western tourists, basically, and
Yep.
then shipped to the US and Europe. And but I think in a space like this, it's almost like, there could be a nice opportunity to reclaim, right, in a way too.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Just to kind of share some information there, Germany has 4 Vedas. It's a Vedas are literature from thousands of years ago, right? Germany has them. It's from the larger Indian subcontinent. They kind of found them, took them, keep them there. They study that all the time, and surprisingly, then nobody has claimed them, but maybe they are protecting them better than people in Nepal. I don't know, but I totally understand
Yeah.
that concept where I think we are more my team, at least the people around, we are more into the essence of having those artifacts in the first place rather than the artifacts themselves. So because it's a revelation of something that you do comes in a form that we tend to keep as an object, right? We lose the value of why it came to existence, and our focus is more to explain why it came to existence. What is the essence of them being there? I think that's the part that we will be focusing. It would be a storytelling on the wall. It could be a game engine like this, where we'll be talking about in a different forms. So that's the intent and idea behind having a heritage museum, which is still in the works. And trust me, it will take several years before that will happen. But
We'll bring classes when it's there.
yeah, it's just a matter of like finding money. It's a very difficult task. If you ever get a chance to get involved in a church donation program, you will learn from them that how difficult it is to get money for something like this. And yes,
With this being a cultural experience to bring to people of America, could you get a state or some sort of like federal funding to help with the cultural income?
probably there are programs. It's a lack of our knowledge in where to go. I am after right now Scott McKenzie. If you guys know about her, there's a Jeff Bezos' ex-wife.
Oh.
She has all this money, and then she has a program where minorities that has immigrated to America and working for religion, culture, and social activities, that she's giving money. So I'm doing my best to put a message in her ears, but grabbing her or getting her attention is very difficult. So we are trying that. And if you have some connections, please do that for us. That would be great help. Yes.
Like in the other building that's in the forest where children will be like an amplified. So like part of like let's say urban ISD or I don't know.
No, it's not a part of that school. So that's a good question. It's a school where, so the primary way people from Nepal migrate here these days is through the green card program, right? For the green card program, kids are born there. They were going to school up to grade 6, 7, whatever that is. They come here, all of a sudden English is a challenge for them. Like all of a sudden English is hard, and they are quick learners. They will do it. But then they're behind math, they're behind in science and whatnot. So we have a group of people who are teachers themselves, and they come and help those kids go into like the schools better. So it's more kind of like an enrichment program. But then for my kids who were born here, we send them there for educating them about Nepali language. Now it's not just English, but from kids from here needs to learn what Nepali is. Schools don't offer Nepali in here, so that's a perfect place to send them for learning Nepali, for example, right? And then again, people are isolated in their own areas, but that also is a place where they can come for the school that now gives an opportunity to interact with parents. People who are like, I have about 40 family around in DFW areas, right? There are people who are just by themselves, and it brought tears in our eyes that there were this one family who had to survive they had to find job, and their kids were like, they got twin, I think. Raising one kid is hard. They had twin. And then we found out that they were like panic in a panic environment, coming here, having nobody that they knew. This is a great place for them to come. This is a great place to associate, and that's how we learn about them. And we offer our help. And they are kind of like a helps to get established in a country that they have chose to come and learn from. So it's all these activities come into a form of school. There are about like 6 rooms that we have dedicated for the classrooms, and they're only kind of open for Saturdays and Sundays. But then there might be extra, like for example, when this would be ready, I'm thinking I will educate them how to make games. And that might happen on Tuesday nights, and then that's the classroom that they will come and participate and learn how to do things. So that's the purpose of this.
Well, yeah, I have so many other questions. I'm trying to figure out which one I want to ask. So could you speak to, you as a Nepali person, right? And you mentioned you're also working with the civil engineer who you said is from the region.
Right.
And this proposal totally misunderstood the cultural context and suggests, made a Greek temple for you.
Right.
What it means to the community, of 42,000 folks who want to invest in a spiritual and cultural center, what it means to them to have someone from the cultural tradition and also a sort of what we might call an insider, right? Who's aware of the traditions, aware maybe more so of their concerns, those sorts of things. Have you gotten feedback on that? Like what that perception is, having you and your colleagues?
Sure, yeah. So one of the problem, this is a lesson learned for me. Like being a designer, I have a certain aspect of how I see things differently from many others may, right? From that perspective, whenever I propose something to people, then amazingly, if you involve 42,000 of people, you will create like a completely different. So we identify I like to get a collective feedback on something rather than me suggesting something and just making a decision and move on. I rather want people to vote, for example, right? We were like, let's present with 3 options and let them people pick whatever they prefer to. Surprisingly, that is a very difficult thing to do in a community project like this. So nothing get moved. It's like stuck there for time, waiting for 3 weeks, becomes 3 months, and nothing get done. So we decided like, hey, we will have these interested group of people that are led by me at this time because I have the experience of working here. I have the understanding of back home. So I became that kind of like a mediator role as a designer, and it takes a lot of time. Trust me, it's been years I have been involved in this one. People think like, oh, you already know you can do it, you can do magic, but that's not true, right? I have to work, I have to think about it, I have to study, I have to figure out what I'm going to copy here, what technology exists here, what's the cost implications, so many things that needs to happen. But ultimately, the kind of like if I relate to that question, if I relate back to the original building that we purchased and how we decided to put a head, and then I was standing by surprise. I was just standing there waiting for my wife to come outside, and all of a sudden I hear, "Whoa! This building now looks like Nepali temple." Right. So it's a not necessarily. It was a revelation for me by listening to other people, what they actually look at. And that roof structure with the slope kind of core building and the soffit being under the roof, that's how they connect with. And that's their visual connection to the space, right? People were standing in front taking pictures, and all of a sudden I told my wife, you know what? I did not do much. It's just the additional of a gate, but people mindset about a warehouse otherwise all of a sudden become a temple. So that's how I see it in terms of like, and then this facility, there's another video. We are almost very close to the time, but there's another video that was the first iteration we did for the fundraising. And at that time, let me see if I can quickly pull that up here. This one right here. So this was the the schedule is very easy. Yes. Yes. In the middle of and again, what happened is the part of the that was the most of the market that we had up and all right, we need to focus on purchasing that, and we did that. That's light ratios. Now,
Trying to talk about,
yes.
and so this but I started and and the elders said, I don't know you, you know, it's not the also project that into our contemporary spaces and sort of think with all the, I'm even thinking of the landscaping, like what the rustling of all the leaves, and you say if the trees start getting big and all the leaves
Absolutely.
on the ground, and then what you mentioned, I think you said it's right by Highway 10.
Yes,
And so that sort of soundscape and all of these things that will mingle and
absolutely.
almost what you've done to design a space that has these, there's that courtyard is surrounded by all these buildings that'll break up
Yes.
that sound
That-
from the highway and other areas.
Yep.
So, it just basically, it's making me think how much we lose, right, in our study of past structures that we prioritize in our class, right, that, when those surrounding spaces get lost over time, or they get built up
Yep.
in, with other spaces, or, over time, different group comes in and, changes things around. And so it really does spark, a different understanding of space when you think about from the ground up.
Yep.
Designing it, yeah.
Interesting point you brought up there, that it was a battlefront. Everybody wanted to show the main building from Highway 10. And my struggle was, guys, you don't want to do that. Let's hide it. What's wrong with hiding it? And then let's make it a surprise element. Like as you walk into, like many times when you walk into the kind of like a little alleyways, and all of a sudden you have this magnificent building in front of you. I was trying to capture that. And then the biggest advantage for me was to buffer the sound from Highway 10, which many people oppose. Oh, no. We need to tell the story by showing the building up front. If they are interested in looking, let them come in, not just expose yourself out to the Highway 10 and kind of bring in all the sound and pollution and whatnot. Let them park, walk, and they'll see it. It was a big battle. It was a big battle for me. It's simple point, simple story, but then people are opposed to that. And that's where the crowd never designs. They only make comments, right? It's the activity that a selected group of people and action-oriented people will make it happen. And we won with that attitude. So
It makes me think of such a different landscape here, right? Because Texas is still open,
yes,
right? It's
Yep.
like, big, right? But we were just talking, right, about the Nagara Tower, right? And then these Northern Star Towers. Well, we were looking at those in drones, right? And as if you could see the whole building at once,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
And in the Khajuraho temple, you can because of certain reasons. But in almost all historic settings, you're gonna have trees in between you and the building.
Yep.
You're gonna have a wall around the entire complex. And so these peaks of those high towers, right? Or the slight visibility of the gold at the top of the spire, right?
Sure, yeah.
Those are the sorts of things that you actually have visibility on. And that's actually what sort of draws you into the space, not these sort of Texas views that you see the entire building from the highway, right? It's a really different landscape. And I mean, thinking of Nepal, which you all remember, the foothills of the Himalayas, right? Sight lines are not like they are in
No,
Texas,
no,
right?
yeah.
And so even that shot that you showed of the courtyard, right, with the pavilion and everything, these sight lines are sort of meandering and you're in an urban space,
Exactly.
And so those sorts of feelings they have a lot of difference than say, and I don't mean to be mean about this, but like a Texas strip mall sort of feeling, right? And so that walk up and you see it all, right? And we're gonna come to that. I mean, it's interesting to think of that internal space that is public, but it has a privacy to it.
Sure.
Too, as you mentioned with the wedding space, and how that develops. We'll get to some of the southern Indian temples and compounds that develop
Right,
and
right.
stuff. So yeah, keep those things in mind as we move forward. Yeah, any other, oh, go ahead. Sorry.
It's basically kind of like, well, like you said, yeah, to like that part, that giving that privacy, like having those trees, and also it kind of gives the place that sense of connected to the environment around them, because those types of religions and cultures are very unique.
Sure.
In a way, the fact those are incorporated not only to the sound, but also the fact that you're creating this whole environment that you're bringing them to the fall.
Absolutely.
Sense. And how you said showing that little peak, even if the trees grow all the way high, see that peak. So people are curious by nature.
Right.
And the fact that they see that curiosity, that'll bring them in a lot of, because if they see the full temple, they're gonna be, oh, it's just a temple. There's a, how many people, you know, like they would want to go around and be able to see. And so I think it's just quite beautiful and intimate, and how this whole kind of relates and kind of involving the community, not only the Nepalian community, but other communities that don't even know. And like I didn't know that Nepalians are about that. So that's
Yeah.
how kind of like.
Exactly. That's the exact, that, those are the things. And then what you brought up is a great example of why different, not just Texas, but strip malls around the United States, right? And they are all like junkyard right now. Why are they closing? I mean, raise a question to yourselves and thinking like, yes, the building serves a purpose, right? But the way it has been interpreted, the way it has been brought into a no man's land, like nowhere, right? Now, all of a sudden, people realize something is happening, and all those malls are going back into dirt. And that's in my kind of like, I like to think about like, have you guys, one of my favorite places that I like to visit is South Lake Mall. Have you, are you familiar with that area?
Yeah.
So everything is outside. You're not connected from one building to the other building. Inside, you have to come out into the street, walk in these sidewalks with the trees and kind of canopies, and you go from one place to another place, another place to another place. The only thing I don't like about that place is cars are right in front of the building.
Yeah.
And when walking with kids, two hands, we need to be very careful. So they kind of did not realize that, but they could have entirely put the cars out of that building and made it a walkable space. That space is never gonna die. Trust me. Because one building, if it doesn't serve for one function, it can be converted into a completely different activity altogether. Whereas try to do that inside of a mall. Big mall, it's very hard to do that, right? Because it's all interconnected, and there's a challenge between like, okay, something is in front of something and something is in front of something. It becomes such a kind of like a management nightmare that the entire building seems to collapse, right? I think from that perspective, the approach that South Lake Development did that is a very connected to the outdoor activities, the walking between spaces, and that's a very welcoming design, in my opinion.
I
So
think universities.
Yeah, yeah.
But, it's, you know, way it is. Speaking of sort of inspirational things, when you were working on the design for this, were there any other custom built spaces, either Nepali, India, you know, sort of similar traditions that you looked at around, you know, built in the US that you could see? I mean,
we did. We
Okay.
actually went, and I made a tour because I have seen, because I'm an architecture student, I have seen different things, my perspective about different cultures and the kind of architecture or the program that they build around. I had that knowledge, but the rest of the team didn't have. So we had visited, there's a Vietnamese Buddhist temple in Austin. We visited that place. I took a bunch of people and we walked around and saw how their establishment were, and we were trying to understand what kind of problems they face and what kind of spaces they created and how that ties back into our space. We went to a Thai establishment in Watuga, Texas. So Watuga has a temple there, which in my opinion is beautiful. It's one of the nicest space that I felt that celebrates the outdoor activities, right? So that's that one. We went to a couple of Hindu temples, so one being the Hanuman temple in Plano. That's a completely different concept, right? Everything is inside, just like a big mall, and that's fine. That's how they approached it. Um, and several little Buddha temples here, different places. There are little kind of boutique type of setup where people have made shrines and whatnot. We visited all these, and we were constantly kind of like criticizing, learning from them, and forming our ideas. But primarily, my role was to motivate people in thinking how those things relates to what we should be doing moving forward, and it's like I said, it just did not happen. Trust me when I say this. I did not sleep for 2 nights doing this sport because I was trying to figure out what is it that I am going to put it there that represents the language that people from Nepal can associate themselves with. It took me 2 nights. I tell people it took me years, but that's actually those 2 nights that I did not sleep, right? And then I formed the idea. I stuck with that idea, and everything else is just all right. You need a 1,000 square feet building. All right, raise the size, you change the walls, and those become such an easy process altogether. So finding that language, finding that interest in what am I after, answering that question kind of led me to realize. That's why you saw the first video and the second video. They're similar. It's just a program differentiation in terms of some people will say later, oh, we need this space. We need to add 100 more square. All right, no problem. Let's do that. And that was my kind of intention to be flexible in the unknown changes that may happen over time. And it's that language that I want to establish. So tomorrow we acquire more lands, we tear the buildings down, and we want to build a new facility there. That gives an opportunity of a background for people to grow, right? It's a language that they can pick up. Oh, but we have done this. Let's do that over here too. So it becomes more like almost like buildings in Europe pretty much grow organically like that, right? And that's the intention. That's the intention in how I am kind of focusing on the certain elements. They're out of proportion. If you try to compare that with Nepali architecture, you will find it rather big. But yet in a proportional scale, that becomes a language that goes from one function to another, and it becomes more like a fabric. That was my intention. So
That was the other thing, your discussion of proportion. Think back to the earliest Hindu temples that we were talking about, and the small steeple mound at the very beginning, right? That proportionality that's very different, right? Then as we see later and later and later in time, where you get these gigantic, right? So that's something that develops. It doesn't start that way, right? And so really that human scale is very important in your most early forms. Right? Well, why don't we say thank you so much,
thank you.
Mr. Adhikari. And I did have ulterior motive when I asked my last question, okay? Because you have an assignment to take on, and you might learn a little bit from our guest. So for your third show and tell, you will be researching, finding an example of a local temple that relates to the religious traditions of the Indian subcontinent. Now, you mentioned the Thai temple, local Thai temple. There is a Hindu temple in Plano. We want to make sure we don't duplicate, but you might have to go outside of DFW to find a place that's not warehouse, where you're not necessarily going to see visual elements. So you might have to go to the Austin region, or you could even go to the southern United States, right? But I'm flexible in what local means. Okay, but try to look close so that you could even visit it. But if you can't find something that's visitable, then you can go beyond. Yeah.
If I may, I can give you. You can search, but definitely there are two important ones in use. Definitely, those I highly recommend. We visited them as well. We have one. It's a BAPS. It's a
yes, it's off of George Bush, right?
Yes, right here. Yes, 161. There's a BAPS.
Is it Irving? Is that Irving?
It's in Irving.
Irving.
Yes.
Okay, so there's definitely one in
Yep.
Irving, which has some
And-
interesting
and
visual details.
In Irving, there's an Islamic center too. So not just Hindu and Buddhism, but there's an Islamic center that we went and visited them, and how they actually conduct their thing.
Yeah, and
Austin
the
has-
Islamic Center in Plano as well.
Yep,
Would be
yep,
interesting, yeah.
exactly. And Austin has two. There's a one in Temple, which is on the way to Austin Temple. There's a Ganesh, Lord Ganesh there. So Houston to Austin 3, and most of them are here itself. And if you just search for like Islamic Center, Hindu Center, Frisco has, Plano has, there are a bunch popping right
And there's
now.
one or
because of
two
the
Buddhist centers in Arlington itself that you
exactly.
can visit quite readily. So
find something that's of interest to you and choose something that has a visual focus, right? That you can make these connections to class. And so think about the types of ways that Mr. Adhikari was describing the use of traditional imagery, right? Traditional architectural features, and then the incorporation of the contemporary, okay? And the incorporation of, new relationships with glass and, various things that modern audiences often favor, right? So research the space as much as possible. That might mean calling somebody up, right, on the actual telephone. I know in your generation that's not necessarily comfortable. Or going there, taking your own photographs if Google doesn't give you good photographs, So you should have some time to do that. And then thinking how it relates to maybe some of the things that was discussed today. Or the historic examples that we've already talked about in the last few weeks, or that we'll continue to talk about when we come back next week. Okay, so this will end our sort of temporal discussion, and then we'll move forward and talk about colonialism. So I don't know. But for your takeaway message, please think about why awareness of local spaces like NCSC, right, or the space that you focus on is significant to our communities as a whole, right? Not individual communities, but the broader, say, DFW community. And what specific insight about awareness, for example, can you draw from your example? So instead of those very general discussions of like, oh, it's good because we want to be tolerant to things, what specifically can you draw, right, from your example that will be unique to your example that you choose? Okay, so that's my challenge to you for this time. All right, yeah.
Is it still fun?
Yes, it is still 4 minutes, and I apologize. I do only give them 4 minutes because of the class size, but maybe I won't. Maybe we'll do it over 2 sessions. If you want more time, I can shut up a little bit about colonialism and give you double the time. If you vote to do that, raise your hand. Would you want double the time, or do you want to do 4 minutes? Ash was saying no. Carla, you were saying no? Okay, we'll stick to 4 minutes, okay? All right, well, let's thank Mr. Adhikari again. Thank you so much. We so appreciate you, and if you get that beta for the game, I think we're
absolutely
testers. So
absolutely.
We'll see you all back on Wednesday. I mean Monday. All right.
So, actually, it was meaning to talk about, I know there's a new, I don't know if it's related to Nepal, but I know it's a festival that the Diwali.
Yes,
festival?
yes.
Okay. How would a person go by doing that type of event? Keep in mind, I work for the city of Grand Prairie.
Okay.
And the thing is, I love culture
It might be.
and the thing